Hi, my name is Melissa Graboyes and I'm a faculty member here in the Clark Honors College. I teach African history, medical history, and about global health.
Why is it important to think about history when discussing eradicating malaria?
It's really important because we're in the midst of another global eradication campaign that got kicked off by the Gates Foundation more than a decade ago. But what a lot of people don't know is that we actually already tried to eradicate this disease in the 1950s with the World Health Organization, and we failed in many parts of the globe. So luckily, there were parts of Europe and South America that actually got rid of malaria, but in most parts of Africa, Asia, they failed. And I think that if we don't pay attention to what's been going on, what has happened historically, we're really likely to continue to have some of the same scientific assumptions that are erroneous and make some of the same mistakes we've made previously.
Why is it important to prepare for failure?
Well, in the case of malaria, I think it's really important to talk about failure because malaria is really unique compared to other diseases that we've tried to eradicate globally. And that means that there's no more naturally occurring cases. Because what happens with malaria is that there's actually the risk that if we try to eradicate the disease and fail, but we control it for a number of years and we reduce infection levels very low, or we actually stop transmission for a number of years and then it returns, it can create a more dangerous disease environment with higher rates of mortality and morbidity, so higher levels of both sickness and death for children and adults through a phenomenon called rebound malaria.
What is acquired immunity?
So acquired immunity is another interesting thing kind of physiologically that goes on with malaria is that if you are a child who's born into a region where malaria is endemic, which means that it's constantly present in the environment at low to moderate to high levels. When you are an infant, you are getting exposed to infected bites by an Anopheles mosquito. Your body is being challenged with the mosquito, the malaria parasite. And when that happens, if you survive those infections, your body acquires a degree of immunity. So what we see is that a lot of children under the age of 5 actually don't survive those initial malaria infections and they die, which is why we see such high childhood mortality 0 to 5. If you're lucky enough to survive until age 5, you've acquired a degree of immunity that means that malaria becomes less a disease of mortality and death and more a disease of sickness.
Do you think malaria can be eradicated?
I don't. I wish I could say I did because I think it's a really optimistic, wonderful thing to think about. And I think the idea of directing public health and global health resources towards alleviating malaria and reducing malaria rates is a great goal. I think that it's a little bit disingenuous to say that right now we're trying to globally eradicate the disease because it denies the history of failure that we've experienced in sub-Saharan Africa, and it also misleads, I think, some of the populations that are on the receiving ends of these interventions that continue to go on today, and it makes it seem like malaria is just on the cusp of being eradicated, and I don't actually think that's true.
What was your favorite part of doing field work in Zanzibar?
Oh man, I had a great time in Zanzibar, partially because I got to work in Swahili, and it was a place that I learned Swahili as a graduate student. It was a place that I got to know a lot of people on the island and in the community where I lived. So I think the most fun was actually doing interviews and learning about things that I would ask a very specific question about medical research or ethics or about malaria, and people would tell me something entirely different. And sometimes that would make me very frustrated because I would think, why aren't they answering my question? But other times, and I think in hindsight, I realized that people have many different ways of showing connectedness between things and explaining why something is meaningful. And I think that people in Zanzibar, I love doing interviews because usually I came out of it learning something that was very different than what I anticipated going in.
Thank you for meeting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.